Hello and welcome to Writing Picture Books with Heart webinar. Let's get started. So, who am I and why am I teaching this webinar? My name is Rosie Pova and I'm a multi-published children's author. I've been writing for over 17 years now, and I have several picture books published and one middle grade novel. And whenever my picture books were released, people have given me feedback on the stories and just categorizing them as sweet and heartfelt. And I've gotten those reviews over and over again from parents and educators and journal reviews. And I've even been asked to teach on writing picture books with heart. So that's why I created this webinar, and I hope it is helpful to you as well. As I mentioned, I've been writing for many years, and I've worked with 5 literary agents. I've gotten more offers of representation. I've sold 5 books directly to publishers, and as you can see, some of them have won awards and been featured in publications such as the New York Times and Parents Magazine, and so on. Here's some of that feedback I had mentioned, and as you can see, this kept coming up and up. A heartfelt text, a sweet story, the sweetest book, heartwarming, all of these reviews and feedback from readers. Same here for Sarah's Song, which is a story about the special bonds kids share with their grandparents. As you can see, heartwarming, touches the heart, touching story, lots of heart, sweet story. And again, for Sunday Rain, sweet story. And I didn't even realize that at first until after people had noticed and categorized my books into the heartfelt stories and touching and some of them more quiet books, because I do write in a range of themes and emotions, funny, quirky, fiction, nonfiction, all of that. But it just so happened that the first ones that got published were all in that same category, and even teachers have categorized them in the social emotional learning, which is great. And I'm excited to have that niche and to establish myself as a writer of heartfelt stories. The funny thing is, even when I get rejections, they still mention the heart of the story. Like this one, as you can see, is from a Random House editor, and she did say that the story has a lot of heart, which is a huge compliment to me. And really, even though it was a rejection, I was excited to hear her feedback. It means a lot coming from a big Random House editor. And here's a screenshot from after I signed with my current agent, and that's what she said on Twitter. Her sweet picture books captured my heart. At the time I'm recording this webinar, this is my latest picture book, just got released, The School of Failure, A Story About Success. And this one is one of my humorous stories. I was really excited to finally get one of my funny ones, funny, quirky ones published. But again, it is a heartfelt story. It has a lot of heart. And actually, to me, that's the best combination when we can, have heart and humor together in a story. It resonates with kids and adults, and I love those kinds of books. So I'm really proud of this one. But before we dive into the tools and techniques that you can use to insert more heart into your own stories, I just wanted to mention something really important, that yes, having the heart of your story be there and be powerful enough to capture the reader's attention, and to touch them in a profound way is great, but it won't make up for a weak story. So the very first thing you need to make sure is having a solid draft of a story, and then look for that refining of the heart. Let's start by clarifying what writing a story with heart means even. So in other words, and you can see that kind of, hear that kind of wording, those are stories that tug at your heartstrings. They're touching the reader on a deeper level. They're full of authentic emotion, and they're also memorable. So we tend to get back to those stories or recommend those stories, and we remember them long after we close the book. But you might say, different readers are touched by different things, right? So how can we make sure we are being, universal in this? Well, that is the actual trick to it. It varies, tastes vary, and different readers will, of course, resonate with different stories in a certain way, but there are some universal elements to a heartfelt story, and this is what we're going to talk about today, so that you can insert those elements and look for them and be strategic and learn how to analyze your stories for that, and looking for that heart and making sure it's there. And the first thing is those kind of stories will tap into a strong universal feeling or concept, like love, a relationship, sense of belonging, grief, friendship, fear, etc. Something that all of us, no matter the background, even age, circumstances, we all experience those types of universal feelings in different situations. So this is the first thing we're going to look for. Okay, let's explore and see, for example, using these books as mentor text, what kind of universal feeling they have. The first one is my own book, If I Weren't With You, and it's about unconditional love and reassurance of safety and security. And this is about a relationship that of mother and child. Of course, very familiar to kids. Also explores anxiety, like that feeling of, being anxious, separation anxiety, or some fears. So all of these are pretty universal. There hasn't been a person who has never had any fears, or the child-mother relationship, or a child grown-up relationship of some kind, being curious, having a lot of questions, feeling anxious about things. So this is the universal feeling in that book. The School of Failure is about making mistakes and trying again, and learning how to handle failures, and persistence, perfectionism. All of these things are explored there, and we've all to some degree been experiencing things like that. Can I Be Your Dog is a very cute book as well, and it's about belonging. It's about wanting to find a home and feeling like you belong. And who hasn't experienced that, really? The next one, Home for a While, is a great book as well, and it has the exact same theme of, having a home and belonging and finding love. And those two books are so different, but again, they explore the same universal feeling. Sweetie is another one of those funny, quirky books, and it's about feeling out of place, feeling weird, being the odd one out. And again, who hasn't experienced that in their life? So we can all relate to that universal feeling. Number two, a heartfelt story takes the reader on an emotional journey. This is really important. We're going to go through the ups and downs, reading the story, and through a series of emotions, and also those type of stories, rich and multi-layered. So we have some depth into them. Number three, those stories are authentic, memorable, and impactful. So we're really going to be able to resonate with the protagonist, with their situation, with their experience, and we're going to remember that story. So, like I mentioned before, those are the type of stories we usually recommend to other readers. We come back to them, or we read the book somewhere and decide to buy it, and they're impactful. They're going to touch us on a deeper level, either be thought-provoking or have a special meaning to us. Okay, let's recap briefly. A heartfelt story taps into a strong universal feeling or concept, takes the reader on an emotional journey. It is authentic, memorable, and impactful. So, how can you achieve that in your writing? Here comes some practical advice that you can apply directly to your manuscript. Practical advice number one, convey the universal concept or feeling through specific, meaningful details. And we're going to read some examples from these three books. The first example is from my own book, If I Weren't With You, illustrated by Philippe Martineau. And as I mentioned before, this is a story about the mother-child relationship, safety and security, anxiety and fears. And so the little cub is always asking Mama Bear all kinds of questions, as kids do. What would you do if that happened? What would you do if that happened? And then on, and Mama Bear has to offer reassurance and love to her cub and answer all the questions. And one of the questions, when she answers, if she's ever going to forget about her child, this is what she says. Mama Bear smiled. How could I? When I hear the birds chirping at dawn, it reminds me of your giggles. When I touch the moss on the trees, it's as soft as your fur, and it makes me think of you. And every time butterflies flutter by, I remember how you love skipping after them. And the thing here is, Mama Bear uses details from her own world. Those are not just random. These are things that she is observing every day. These are things that her little cub loves to do. Previously in the story, it's mentioned that Willie loves to skip after butterflies. And so these are all very, very specific, special, meaningful to the character details that she uses from her own world. So they're not random. And this is really crucial to know when you're picking what kind of details and to be really specific about them. Here's the other page of that same spread that I already read to you. Our next example is from Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, written by Joanna Hall, illustrated by Dunk Hall. Some people have eyes like sapphire lagoons, with lashes like lace trim on ball gowns, sweeping their cheeks as they twirl. Big eyes, long lashes. As you can see, these specific details, we can picture those, the imagery, and they're meaningful to the story. They're very specific to that particular character. And here's the full page so you can see the illustration. Here's another example from that same book. Mama's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea crinkle into crescent moons when she comes home from work. She scoops me in her arms, eyes sparkling like starlight, and tickles me until we laugh ourselves onto the floor. Can't you just imagine that, even if we didn't look at the picture? It's so lively, and the tickling and the eyes and the glow and the simile here, it all fits really well together to create an imagery and an emotion for that spread. Our next example is from Big Bear Was Not the Same, written by Joanna Rowland and illustrated by John Leder. Whenever Little Bear got into sticky situations or scary ones, Big Bear was right by his side to help him with his big bear claws, his big bear teeth, and his big bear hugs. And as you can see, so the author could have stopped right there. Big Bear was right by his side to help him. But she didn't. She continued to paint this imagery in the reader's head with Big Bear claws and Big Bear teeth and his Big Bear hugs. So it's really making this spread so much more powerful. So we saw the examples of using details, but which details, you might ask? How do you know which ones are the right ones? So here are some questions that you can ask yourself to help you decide. What is my character's word like? Consider the setting. Your character, is it a human or an animal? Where are they located? What is around them? What is their everyday life? What does it look like? So just imagine that world, and maybe you can make a list of all of these things. And then we're going to consider that in the choosing of the details. Another question to consider, what's important to my character? So again, what are they experiencing? What are their relationship? What is the thing that makes them happy or makes them sad? What is really important to them? We already saw this in the books that I shared with you. The details come from that relationship or that situation or that particular world, and they have to be really meaningful and important to the character, not random, not something that is really has no meaning behind it. Another thing to consider is, what do you want the reader to feel on that particular spread? And that will, you'll stay focused on the emotion. So when you're picking those details, they will create, again, an imagery and a feeling for the reader. Do we want to be joyful? Do we want to be sad? Do we want to have, the reader, make the reader laugh? What is it that we want to accomplish with this particular spread? And that's how we're going to pick the details. And we're going to be really focused on the feeling that they create. So after you've considered all of that and answered those questions, you're going to make a list and pick and choose which ones you want to use. And that can go for every spread that you want to have that strong emotion, the few points where we're going to take the reader on the emotional journey, and make sure that those details are reflected throughout the story. Practical advice number 2, pay attention to the emotional journey. And how do we do that? Well, we're going to create contrast. There's always the before and after, and I'm talking about emotional contrast. The other thing is, dig deeper. Don't just scratch the surface. Engage the reader on a more powerful level. As I mentioned before, these stories are multi-layered. They're rich, and they have themes that are universal, but also multi-layered. The other thing we want to make sure is that we resonate with the reader, because if the reader can't connect with the experience, they're not going to care. So for that, we have to consider the age group, the topic, the universality of the emotion. So if we're talking about, so we're not in picture books specifically, we're not going to talk about adult problems. And if we do, such as, divorce or somebody lost their job, we're going to make sure that we're exploring that through the eyes of a child, not through the eyes and emotions of the adult. But what is the child experience as a result of that? Obviously, they're not going to be the one who lost their job, or they're not going through divorce themselves, but they're in a family that is going through something. So how is that going to affect the child protagonist? And we're going to write from that perspective and exploring those emotions. So here are some specific examples from these three books. Again, Big Bear was not the same. It has friendship, and it has trauma, it has fear, it has the before and after. Like, the contrast is before and after that traumatic incident that happened to Big Bear. So we have this beautiful friendship between Little Bear and Big Bear, and all the things they're doing and how they feel being together. And so we have that normal world for them. And then something happens, something really bad happens that is traumatizing to Big Bear, and it really changes things for him. And not just for him, but also affects the friendship. So here's your multi-layered richness and different themes that dig deeper. So we do have that contrast first with the friendship, the before and after the traumatic experience, and then also how that changes Big Bear, and in everything that he does from that moment on. So there's our, contrast in this book, and the deeper layers. And of course, it resonates with readers because everyone has experienced something that has affected them in a way that really went deeper and changed things for them. The other example is from The Rough Patch, and you're probably familiar with this book, and if you're not, I do encourage you to read it. It's an amazing book. And that, again, we have the contrast, having a pet and having life be wonderful, enjoying your pet, playing with your pet, and then what happens when the character lost their best friend, their pet, and how that affected them. So again, multi-layered story. We have the contrast, obviously emotional contrast, really, really strong, and resonates with kids. Of course, losing a pet or losing someone special is definitely a universal theme. In my own book, Sarah's Song, illustrated by Emma Allen, we have that relationship with Grandma when things were great and they were singing and dancing together and going to the fall festival. And then what happened after, when Grandma was aging and she started using a cane and she was no longer able to dance and sing like before. So this is how that affects Sarah, how that affects their relationship, definitely the contrast and the multi-layers, and it resonates with kids again. Practical advice number 3, remember, less is more. Well, don't dilute your storytelling with too much telling, too much explaining or spelling everything out. This is very common, especially with new writers, and I see it over and over with my students in my writing classes and mentorships. There's just a lot of telling, and that's not how you create picture books. Every word counts, and there's illustrations to be considered. So really have to train your brain to look for those passages of telling and remove them, and do more of the showing, not telling. The other thing is, don't be melodramatic. Don't try to manipulate the reader with a sentiment, because they will catch on that. And you have to be authentic. It really has to, when it's authentic, then it resonates. Otherwise, it just turns the reader off, and nobody likes the melodramatic stories. Really. So the other thing is leave room for the reader to fill in the emotion. You know, you have to engage them so that they're investing their feeling into it. If you're just telling them everything, spelling everything out, they're not really engaged deeply. But if you leave room for them to fill in the emotion, because again, we all have different experiences. We're not going to have the exact same experience as in the story we're writing for every reader who reads it, but the feeling is there, and we can leave room for them to insert what has been important, significant in their life, and connect that with the story. Practical advice number 4, use evocative language and imagery. Really, really important. So consider the 5 senses. It doesn't mean you have to, overdo this, but you'll be very strategic about using those to work in your favor, not against you, and for the story. So really pick your language and imagery and use the 5 senses as possible. We're going to take some examples from these 2 books. This is Evan, the main character in the book, and this spread happens right after Evan had lost his beloved pet, his dog, and this is his emotional state right here. One morning, he found himself with a hoe in his paws. Swinging angrily, he slashed the garden to the ground. He hacked it all to bits and threw everything into a heap. But a good place won't stay empty for long. New plants sprouted and stretched toward the sky. Weeds. Itchy ones, spiky and prickly ones, foul-smelling ones. These weeds suited Evan just fine, so he took care of them. You can see the details, the feeling, the itchy one, the smelling, the foul-smelling one, and how he's angrily hacking the plants. All of this is full of emotion, full of details, and the sensory details as well. Here's an example from my book, Sunday Rain, illustrated by Amaria Rosher. A leaf flew by, swinging down and side to side, then another and another. Whoosh, the wind whispered again. Lightning zigzagged through the clouds. Boom, crashed thunder. So we have the sounds here. I used a lot of onomatopoeia in this book. We have the visuals with the specific details that create that imagery and that feeling on this spread. Here are 2 more spreads that I wanted to share in regards to sensory details. Outside smelled like wet grass and flowers and the pages of a new book. Elliot looked around. He hesitated, but then, and the other spread, inside, the house smelled like freshly baked bread and stew and warmth. It was time for supper. So, this circles back after he's outside and trying to make new friends, and then it circles back when he gets inside the house. And again, I'm using smells for this spread for sensory details. Practical advice number 5, employ literary devices. Metaphors, similes, alliteration, onomatopoeia, personification, and all the other kinds that are really well suited for your story. And just beware of cliches though, because those will weaken your story really quickly. Nobody wants to see those in our writing. And also consider a refrain or a phrase, a repetition. And we're going to see an example from this book, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. At the beginning of the story, we have the main character talking about her own eyes. And it says, I have eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea. And then we have Mama's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea crinkle into crescent moons. So it's repeating and then it's expanding on it. Next, we have Alma's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea don't work like they used to. Now she's talking about her grandma eyes. And again, we repeat and then we include something specific to that character. And finally, she talks about her sister's eyes. May's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea blink against the window until I come home from school. Okay, now, so after we've talked about all of these different elements that you can use for your writing, are you ready for my secret formula about inserting heart into your stories? And here it is. Authentic sentiment plus powerful imagery equals memorable storytelling. And again, we saw all of these examples from the books and what they do. So if you can authentically express the character's emotion and pair that with a solid verbal image, and we're not talking about the pictures, just a verbal image that moves the reader, it will result in a memorable and powerful storytelling. It will be touching. It will resonate. So just think about those elements and apply them to your storytelling and see if when you're reading it to yourself, what do you feel? How do you imagine the reader will feel after reading it? And revise until you're satisfied with what it's achieving. And you can go spread by spread and scene by scene and see if it's effective and if it's doing the job. Okay, now let's talk about themes and layers. As we mentioned before, those stories are really multi-layered and often have multiple themes in them. And for that, I'm going to use my own book, Sunday Rain. So here's what we have in Sunday Rain. And some of that was in the original first draft. And the draft that I actually sold to the publisher. I sold this book directly to Lantana. And so some of the themes and layers were already there. And then the amazing thing happened after working with my brilliant editor. She suggested some little tweaks and, a few minor changes, but really those were quite powerful because they brought in more layers to the story and more themes. And I was really so happy that I got to work with her, and this is how the story turned out to be. I'm really proud of that. So here it is. The story is about, a family moving away, just being in a new neighborhood and everything is new. So we have the moving theme, and layer. Then we have a protagonist who is a bookworm. He's very shy, he's introverted, he loves reading. So we have a book about books. Then we have imaginative play because Elliot has a big, wild imagination. He lives with his fictional friends and has adventures with them. So that is a strong theme in the book because he uses that to solve his own problems. So imaginative play is another layer, another theme. Then there's making new friends. He's new to the neighborhood. He's the new kid. He doesn't know anyone. So he wants to have friends, but again, he's really shy and he doesn't know how to approach other kids. So this is a story also about making new friends. There's inclusivity and biracial character, and this was suggested by Lantana when they acquired the book, and it was perfectly fine because they did find an illustrator who could collaborate on that level and insert her own experience into the book because she does have biracial kids, and she was really passionate about having characters to reflect that and seeing her own kids into children's books. So that was a great additional layer to the book we were all very happy about. Another thing is boys reading books with girl protagonists. We sometimes hear, these books for boys, the books for girls. And in the original draft, Elliot was reading a book about a prince fighting a dragon. But then my editor suggested we change the prince to princess. And I was so excited about that. I was really bummed. How did I not think of that? This is brilliant. Of course, it has to be a princess. Um, and so we did that, and again, there goes another layer. There's a boy who's reading a book about a princess. There's nothing wrong with that because, yeah, all books are for all genders, for all kids. Regardless of the protagonist, right? So, and another thing was breaking stereotypes. We have now the princess warrior, and the princess is saving the kingdom. And the other thing that we changed, really one verb, one word, and it was crucial to the story, and that was the scene where the princess, at first in the original draft, you know, um, she slayed the dragon. And then my editor suggested that we did change it to befriended the dragon. And of course it made sense. She won the battle with kindness. She made a new friend too. It was just brilliant and falling into place amazingly well. And so of course I was happy with that too. Now we have a princess who saves the kingdom with kindness. Um, and so you can see how many layers and themes are in this book, but the thing is, they fit really well together. They're not distracting. They're not a separate plot line that is going to be really overwhelming. They're just there to reinforce the story, to help the story, not the opposite, not distract and not be too much. So this is really important when we're inserting different layers. We're not going to just make something up for the sake of having an additional layer. It really needs to fit well for the story. It needs to make sense for the character, for the overall takeaway. So we need to be really strategic about that too. So after going through all these examples that I just shared from my book, think about that. What additional layers can you add to your story that will contribute to its heart? And again, you have to pick wisely and really consider that. But make a list and see what else can be in that story. How can you tweak things, change things so that there are more layers, there are deeper sub-layers to that, but they all work together and fit well. And speaking of writing picture books with heart, we must mention the quiet books. People often think of, stories with heart, about those quiet books, and there's even a misconception that they are hard to sell, but in my experience, they're not. And they just need to find the right home, but once they do, they usually do pretty well on the marketplace. And I'm going to mention some quiet books. Well, Sunday Rain would be considered a quiet book. I think one of the reviewers called it a quiet book. But it was the easiest book I've ever sold. I only sent it out to a few places and I found a home really quickly, and the editor was excited about it. And it's been featured in the New York Times, and Parents Magazine recommended it. So it's done pretty well. And again, it's a quiet story. When people, say they don't sell well, that's not my experience. A Sick Day for Amos McGee, lovely book, again, on the quiet side. Sophie Squash, I love this book, and I know Pat Zitlow Miller has shared with us on webinars that at first, yeah, she couldn't they couldn't sell it because editors kept saying it's quiet, but then once it found its place, the right editor. it did really, really well. And people started, it kind of started a movement with the squash and kids having a, pet squash, drawing faces, and everybody was posting on social media, and teachers and educators, parents. It was really good to see how this book resonated with kids so much, and it's done great. And The Rabbit Listened, again, very quiet book, but so powerful. It's amazing. I love this book. So if you're not familiar with it, read it. And actually, all of these, just to see, different examples of quiet but powerful books, full of emotion, full of heart. And I also have to mention this one. I love, love, love this book. Ida always, every time I read it, it's just powerful. Even though I know what the story is about, I know what happens, still, it's such a powerful story that it's really touching on every time I read it. Now I'm going to share another hack with you. So here it is. The more cheerful the emotion, the more you zoom in. The heavier the emotion, the more you zoom out. And I'm going to explain what I mean by all. And I'm going to use this spread as my first example. And you can see this is the spread where Evan, the main character, loses his best friend, his pet, his dog. So, and this is what the text is. But one day, the unthinkable happened. And this is all it says. You can see there's a lot of white space on the page. The picture, you can see, we can't even see Evan's face. He's turned away. We can't even see the pet, but we get the picture, you know, of what's happening. So, and it's zoomed out. It's not in the reader's face. We don't have a lot of text. We don't say all the things like, oh, the dog got sick and he couldn't walk and he couldn't eat and, it got worse and then this happened. That would be too much, like very melodramatic, and too heavy. But and also about the picture, if it's just in our face, it's going to be overwhelming. But we get it, and there's plenty of room for the reader to insert their own emotion, to be engaged with this. So there's a lot of white space again. And consider this, the picture book will work with pictures, so the text doesn't have to say all that much, and we can get it. You can trust the reader that they will get the emotion, they will get what's going on, what's happening. We don't have to spell it out. We don't need telling. We don't need play-by-play description. This is enough and powerful. And again, this is the only thing it says, one short sentence. How many words is this? 6 words. 6 words and a picture from, a distance with the character's face away from the reader. Very powerful. So this is what I mean by, zooming out. First of all, we're not saying too much, and then the picture is zoomed out. And I'm going to have another example to demonstrate. Here is our next example from Big Bear Was Not the Same. Again, one short sentence. This is the traumatic event. This is, the point with the most emotion, like the climax here. One day, something scary happened to Big Bear. And again, the author is not spelling it out for the reader. She's not going into detail about this fire and how it felt hot on Bear and scary and traumatizing or all the things. This is not the place to do the details. We zoom out. We zoom out and we just say very little. We let the picture speak for itself. As we can see what's going on, we don't have to use the words. A very minimal text, zoomed out, and this is the traumatic event that happened to Big Bear. And here's our example of zooming in when the emotion is cheerful, joyous. As you can see on this spread, we have these two characters. We have a close-up of the two characters. And look at the text compared to the, previous examples. We have like a whole paragraph, and we're staying with that. We're describing, mama's eyes, and we read that before, but I'm going to read it to you again. Mama's eyes that kiss in the corners and glow like warm tea crinkle into crescent moons. When she comes home from work, she scoops me in her arms, eyes sparkling like starlight, and tickles me until we laugh ourselves onto the floor. So we have this, we're staying with this, we're describing more, she scoops me and her eyes sparkle and she tickles me and we're on the floor and we laugh and all of these things, we are staying with that emotion. We have a close-up with the picture and we have a close-up with the text because we are really staying and describing in more detail what is happening here. So I hope that all of these tips and tools that I shared for you to use in your writing are helpful to you, and that you can really take them and apply them to your stories. And now that you know what you're looking for and how to achieve that feeling, and the different tools that you can use. But again, remember, and I said that at the beginning, that it's really important to have a strong story, strong character, no plot holes. The structure needs to be right, and everything else needs to be in place before we even consider inserting those details and the heart of the story and all the other, polishing sort of elements. So here's some questions for you to consider because if you do need help with making sure your stories are solid and you understand structure and have a strong character and all of these things, I am available to help with that as well. I just wanted to briefly share with you some of my courses and teachings that might be very helpful to you depending on what stage you're at. But again, speaking of a solid foundation, just like this example of Jenga, if you're missing, parts, big parts at the bottom, no matter how how many pretty things you put on the top, at any point it could crumble, and that just ruins the whole thing. There is no story if we don't have, the story with heart, if we don't have a solid story. So, polishing comes later, but again, do you know the publishing business? You know that this is a must. Sending out the best work that you can and not missing those chances to impress an editor or an agent. So how long have you been writing? Do you know how to revise well? Are you objective with your work? And again, if you do need guidance and support, I have several courses and mentorship programs that have been super successful for my students, and just wanted to mention that to you here as well. And if you need professional feedback, anything like that to shorten the learning curve. I have a student who worked with me for a few months, and shortly after that, she signed with an agent. She sold a book, and for me, because I made all the mistakes when I was first starting out, it took me 12 years. It's really, really embarrassing to say, but it took me 12 years to get traditionally published. I made all the mistakes. I didn't have guidance. I didn't have support. I didn't know what I was doing. So it was, a big struggle. I don't want anyone else to go through that struggle and learn the hard way like I did. So I've created those courses that I've been teaching for a few years now, and my students have gotten amazing, amazing results. So allow me to share with you too. My most popular course is Writing for Children from Idea to Submission in 10 weeks. And I'm just going to briefly share what that includes and how maybe it could be the right fit for you. Here I've just listed the modules for all 10 weeks, and we start with story ideas, regardless of, whether or you've been writing for many years, and, have many stories already, or you're just starting out. When I talk about ideas, I'm talking about analyzing your ideas, how good they are, how strong they can be, just really evaluating and being very wise about that, because there are no, super unique ideas that nobody has ever explored or written about. But the thing is, you can make your story stand out depending on how you handle this idea, the angle for your story, what to look for, what to do, what not to do, and how you can tweak those ideas to stand out in the market. Because chances are many books have already been written on whatever it is that you're writing. It's not going to be the first book, but why would an editor buy it and publish it? What is going to be unique about it and fresh about it? So we do start with ideas. Like I said, I need everybody to have a solid foundation, and simply a good idea or a good concept is not enough. It's all in the execution, but we have to have that fresh angle from the very start. The next one is main character. Really, really important. Main character is pretty much everything. A lot of editors are looking for character-driven stories. Those are the ones who are most likely to make it into a series. If the character is really well done, and kids resonate with characters. So, main character, we pay extra attention to that in one of the modules. Then story problem, of course, if there's no problem, there's no story. But again, what is it that you need to know, look for, and how to execute that problem? Setting, this is quite overlooked. Not a lot of writers think about setting necessarily the way they should. And sometimes we just take it for granted. The story happens wherever the story happens. But it's really important because it could work in your favor if you know how to use the setting to your advantage to bring another layer to the story, or to evaluate the story in a way that is going to stand out. So setting is really important. I dedicated a whole module on that. Then comes story structure, and I think I share like 12 or more story structures that you can use for your writing, and they all come with mentor text and examples. So it's really clear on the structure, and you can even experiment and see which one fits best for your own story. Writing a first draft, yes, again, do's, don'ts. It's better to know when you're writing this draft, and having these tools and this knowledge, rather than having a draft then you struggle to fix and revise, and it's not working, it's not fitting, and you don't even know why. So start strong and do the steps. Revision, it's this is where the magic happens, and how we revise is so important, because our first draft is not going to be great, it's not going to be perfect, it's going to need work, but how we revise is really crucial to making the story, to make it work. So we have that, and huge list on revisions, on when it comes to big picture revisions, and then line revisions. making a dummy. This has been so very helpful to my students, and I've gotten a lot of comments on it, how they really had no clue about using this tool, but how it was so very helpful. And I teach you how to do that as well. And you don't have to be an illustrator, by the way. This is just, writing for writers who are using a dummy as a tool, not for author illustrators or just illustrators. Just wanted to make that clear, so you don't have to draw any pictures or anything like that. And then writing a query letter, so important. This is the first impression of your work, your submission, when you send it out to agents and editors. How do you know if it's effective? They can tell in a matter of seconds if this query letter it comes from someone who knows what they're doing, who's been someone who's done their research, and who has created like a professional query letter for their work, to hook the reader, to impress the publishing professional. Otherwise, it's really easy to spot amateurs or beginners and making all the mistakes that we all make if we didn't know any better, right? So really important step to get you to submission. And finally, submitting to agents and editors. Of course, we want to sell our books, we want to have them published and available, but secure an agent or editor. And in my case, like I mentioned before, I've sold 5 books directly to editors, and I've worked with 5 agents, but I've really had multiple offers of representation. So again, submitting is the next step for those professionals to help us bring that book into the world. How do we handle that? Do we know? This is the part where I talk about, the business side of publishing. There's the craft and there's the business. So there's resources to help you create really well-targeted submission lists to agents and editors. There are a bunch of bonuses, as you can see here. Ebook, 17 questions to ask an agent if you get an offer of representation. This is so important because it's really going to help you decide whether this agent is a great fit. And when you get on the call, it's quite helpful to have those questions, to know what to ask them, what you're looking for, to be very clear on your own vision, and then communicate that with the agent who's proposing representation. And I've used those questions. I've created them on the last round because, again, I learned the hard way, because it's really better to have no agent than having someone who is not a great fit for your work or for your personality, or doesn't have the same vision, they have the same goals. So these questions are really, really helpful, especially when you have multiple offers like I did, at one point, and then you have to choose, which agent are you going to pick. So very, very helpful. And then submission proposal template that I've created for my work, because now a lot of editors and agents require, even for fiction picture books, and the picture book might be like 200, 300 words, and my proposals anywhere between 11 to 16 pages, and they include a lot of information, and editors, like I mentioned, and agents are now requesting those. So it's better to have a template and just be ready to fill in the information. Really useful to create that for your submission. And then again, I have a lot of resources and links and all the things. And here I've included some testimonials from former students and mentees, and you can read them here. You can visit the course page and find a lot more. These are real people who have taken the course, completed all the assignments, and they have amazing things to say about how it was helpful and how it advanced their career and all the things they've be able to accomplish as a result. And so I'm really, really proud of this course, and I'm so happy for my students that they're getting great results. So this is the student Blair that I mentioned before, the one who worked with me, and then she signed with an agent and she sold a book. And this is just one of her many tweets, just spreading the word and telling people about how wonderful the course is and how grateful she is, because she was really able to step from never having written anything for kids and just starting out with a story idea with some very rough draft, and going to having 6 polished stories, and signing with an agent and selling books, and just really advancing in such a short time. So yeah, this is just sharing Blair's feedback about the course. And this picture with Blair was taken when we worked together on the mentorship. And so one of her, and the screenshot of the tweet was after Blair announced that she has now signed a contract for her book, and that was super exciting. Here's the link to my webpage where you can find, this course, as well as many other trainings and the mentorship and in-person writing retreats that are coming up. So if you're curious, go check it out. This is my webpage, and it has all the different trainings that I do. So when you click, you'll be able to see information and details for each one of them. This concludes the webinar. I hope it was helpful to you, and I've included a handout with resources where I have a long list of the books that I mentioned. Like I've included the books I mentioned in this presentation, but a lot more titles to help you that you can use as mentor text, just stories that are heartfelt and sweet, and read through many more books that you can see what they're doing and how the author and illustrator have applied these tips and tools that I talked about, so that you can pick whatever works for your story. Again, the handout is included with that list. You can download it. It's a PDF and have it to go through those mentor texts. And I'm rooting for you so that you write many heartfelt stories that touch the readers, and you really have impactful characters, and those stories stay with your readers long after they've closed the book. Thank you again for being here. You can find me on my social media and follow me, check out the courses and trainings, and cheers to your writing success.